Today is a little bit different because normally I read YA, but I took a look at my TBR and I was like, I'm going with a thriller. I love thrillers. I love the way that it makes my mind work. And this one was no exception. This is The Daughter by Jane Shemilt, and it revolves around the disappearance of a teen girl. Her name is Naomi, and she's 15. She just one day did not come home after the play. It was narrated by her mother. So on top of figuring out what happened to her, we also learn that Jenny's world was not what she thought. She thought she understood everything. She thought everything was okay. And she ultimately learns that she kind of knew nothing at all. That said, as much as I loved the book, or I should say, as much as I enjoyed the book, I often felt like I was reading underwater. You know, when you're really tired and you're trying to think about something and you just don't feel like it's clicking or that is dragging. That's sort of how it felt for me at moments during the novel. It started off really strong, and then it slowed down for me, and then it got interesting again, and then it slowed down for me for quite a while, and then it picked back up the end. The chapters, or not even the chapters, but the scenes, they do switch back and forth between past and present. So at first, I was like, okay, why do we even have these present moments? Because they were very short, like a paragraph or two long. They give you an idea of where Jenny is in the present so that you can contrast it with her mindset in the past, or even just what she's dealing with in the past. I wanted them to be longer. But then I really started enjoying the past, and so I was really glad that the present scenes were very short, and then they got longer, and I found I didn't really care what was happening in the present because I felt like I was missing something. I'll get into that later. I actually started skimming the present scenes so that I could get back to the past, because the past was what was really dealing with Naomi's disappearance, and that, for me, drove the novel. I enjoyed seeing everything else that Naomi learned about herself and her family, but I just thought the circumstances surrounding Naomi's disappearance were so interesting, because we go from thinking she's been kidnapped to maybe she chose this. I loved seeing all the different people that they suspected and all the different avenues they explored to ultimately find an answer. That said, Jenny is a doctor, her husband is a doctor, and then they have these three children, two twin boys who are teens, Ted and Theo. Not Ted, sorry, the husband is Ted, one of the sons is Ed, and the other is Theo. It took me a really long time to separate them all, because I guess they all come from the name Theodore, because Theodore could be Ted, then Ed, and then Theo. That was a very minor thing that bothered me. But yes, so Ted is the husband, and then Ed and Theo are the twins. And then there's Naomi, who is 15. But at the beginning of the novel, we are under this impression that even though Naomi and then both of the boys have kind of drifted away from their parents, that their parents know them, that Naomi knows her kids, and that this current distance is more about being a teenager than anything else. That said, the novel opens with Jenny coming home and seeing Naomi dancing around in these really high, sexy black heels. And that is our first impression of Jenny. And it's kind of like a person who is caught in the middle, because, not Jenny, that's our first impression of Naomi, because Jenny is sort of caught off guard, put off by seeing her daughter in such a different light, because her daughter is someone who, she's too young for that kind of a shoe. She's someone who wears Converses. So Jenny is not Jenny, why do I keep calling her Jenny? Naomi is obviously somebody who is blossoming, and her mom is not ready for it. Then Naomi has been part of a school play. She goes to one of her performances. She had told her mother that the cast was going to have a meal afterwards, so they sort of bargain for how late she can stay out. Jenny falls asleep on the couch. She wakes up and it's about 2 a.m. and Naomi is not home. Her husband, however, who is a neurosurgeon, has just arrived home, and he is not as concerned as Jenny is about Naomi's not being home. They wait a little bit, and then they start freaking out. They start calling people. They try to call Naomi. They get the police involved. And it's very interesting to me because then the next morning they have to tell these boys, and Ed just gets super angry. Like, why would this matter? Like, why is it a concern that Naomi's not here? Why are you overreacting, essentially? That was my first clue that all was not well in the state of Denmark. They then get connected with an inspector named Michael. He kind of takes charge of the investigation, and yeah, you know, they go to the schools, they go to the theater, they go everywhere that there could be a connection to Naomi, and there is honestly nothing. They have spoken to her best friend who had been part of the play, and the best friend kind of tells half-truths, and eventually we learn that there was a boy in the picture. But the best friend is confused because she's like, if Naomi was going to run away, she would have let me know. Like, she would have sent some kind of note. And Jenny is kind of thinking along the same lines. She's like, if Jenny was having an issue, she would have let us know. And since she didn't let us know, then obviously somebody has taken her. So here are some spoilers. Ted has been having an affair. Ed has a drug problem, and in Theo, there's really nothing wrong with Theo. But then we also learn that Jenny got pregnant. Not Jenny, Naomi, that Naomi was pregnant. So she's 15, but she has gotten pregnant by, so I'm a little confused about this. So the boy James is in the play, but they had met because he tutored her for something, but he had been left back a year. So I don't quite know how old he is. So I'm thinking he's 18 or 19 because I got the impression that he should have graduated, but he didn't. So then, of course, I'm like, why would somebody who failed and have to stay back a year be tutoring the daughter? Really not a big deal, but it was something that got caught in my mind. Anyways, they had begun a secret affair, and they had been sleeping together for like 6 months, and Naomi recently had discovered she was pregnant, and she didn't really want the pregnancy, but that's neither here nor there. But then we also learn that she not really had a drug problem, but she had been stealing drugs from her dad's office to sell to somebody else. We're learning all these little things about Naomi when our first impression from Jenny was that Naomi doesn't do anything wrong. Naomi's kind of this perfect child. As we're learning all of these things, we're also learning that everybody thinks that Jenny has too high of expectations. Nobody wants to disappoint her, and so that's why they're keeping all their secrets from her. And then even Jenny herself, she's a general practitioner, and she had recently discovered that one of her patients has leukemia. But the issue that she's having with this is that she had ignored the signs because she thought it was just bad parenting. She has been struggling with guilt in that she doesn't even know herself anymore. Like, she doesn't even trust herself as a doctor. So it's like, what does Jenny know? And so I love all of these aspects that make these people human. But at the same time, I didn't always understand their behaviors. In the past, Ed keeps lashing out at Jenny, and it's like, why? I was trying to think back to when I was a teenager, and yes, I did lash out at my parents. I did not really confide in my parents, but what teenager does, but I did not really push them away either. So I was like, honestly, what have these parents done? What has Jenny done to deserve this kind of treatment? I had working parents as well, and they both worked long hours, but I never felt neglected by my parents, but it's like Naomi decided to run away because there were too many pressures at home. Ed stole drugs from his mother to sell to feed his own addiction, but it's all Jenny's fault. I'm like, I didn't understand that. And then later in the novel, in the present, they're celebrating Christmas. Jenny goes to pick up Ed and his girlfriend from the train station, and he's all loving and kind. And then they get to the house, and I think it's the next day, and Jenny discovers the Christmas present that the girlfriend had given her, which were coal pencils, because Jenny is an artist. And she's just thanking her, and Ed just goes off. He's like, oh, that's still the most important thing to you, huh? And I'm like, where did this come from? You were just all loving to your mother. And, like, did you get up on the wrong side of the bed or something? He claims that it's just being back at the house that brings back all these memories, and I couldn't buy it. He just goes off on this diatribe, and then he leaves, and then essentially Jenny doesn't see hide nor hair of him for the next couple days. When I say he leaves, he goes to a pub or something. Like, he has to get out of the house, and he kind of avoids her for the rest of the time. Even when they are in the same room, it's like he acts as if there's nothing else to discuss, and they just never talk. And that's also a theme that I noticed that really bothered me, is that once Jenny's eyes have been opened to the fact that they never say what they mean to say, that there's really no communication in the family, I would have thought that things would have started changing, or at least in the present tense. It's been about a year or so later that they would have gotten to a point where, because all the skeletons are out of the closet, like, they're actually speaking, they're talking about their anger, they're talking about the problems that are going on, and they still never say anything. And maybe we wouldn't notice it, but she constantly points it out. She's constantly saying, well, there's more that he wants to say and he's just not saying it. Or does he really mean something else? Like, why doesn't he say what he means? Even towards herself, it's just like, I should say this, but I'm not going to. Just say it already. I'm so sick and tired of you having all these problems because of communication issues. You're not making it any better. We're going to get into some major spoilers here, because I can't wait any longer to talk about Naomi. So the thing is, Naomi, actually, I've got to go back a little bit. Here is a little foreshadowing. I know I keep saying I'm going to talk about something, and then I remember something else, but it's because as many issues as I might have with this novel, it is so well written. And Shemilt really, she knows how to drop hints that may or may not be important. Things keep getting brought up. They don't feel extraneous, but they could be extraneous, but they also feel like they're just necessary for a character's character development. And so, the father, Ted, is a neurosurgeon, and prior to the book's opening, he'd had a surgery go wrong, and then a lawsuit had occurred. In the end, the lawsuit never went to trial because they couldn't find any wrongdoing on the surgeon's part. So the author is British, and so the book takes place in England, and in their culture, there are a sect of people called travelers, like gypsies. And so there had been a band of gypsies who had brought in one of their children because she had a spine issue. Ted is set to fix this spine issue, and then in the end, I guess it's like one of their resident surgeons, someone who, it's like a learning hospital. So in the end, he lets this other student surgeon do the surgery. Things go wrong, and the child is automatically paralyzed, and these gypsies get extremely angry. Back to Naomi. Naomi has met a boy. As I have already said, she is pregnant, but then she meets someone new. So obviously, the family knew nothing about James, who got her pregnant, who she was apparently in love with. And so if they have no idea about him, then they are completely clueless about the new guy that she meets. This new guy is older. He's in his mid-20s, and we eventually learn that he is kind of the leader of this gypsy clan that had come to Ted for help. The initial reason behind coming after Naomi was for revenge. Then the guy, he may or may not have actually fallen in love with Naomi. I just love this about the writing where everything has tied together at this point. This is like the very end of the novel where we're finally learning about Naomi. So as I said, Ed had a drug problem. Who was feeding Ed's drug problem? This guy, Yaska. Ted, the husband, was having an affair. Who set fire to his girlfriend's apartment the night that Naomi left? Not Yaska, but the Gypsy clan. And then who had been one of Jenny's patients right before she met with the patient that wound up having leukemia? Yaska. He is having his hand in everybody's lives, and they don't even know it. I will get back to Yaska and Naomi. But Jenny, one of my problems with her is that she does romanticize the situation. I guess it's her way of coping with Naomi's disappearance is by thinking that Naomi has to be okay, which I get. Every parent wants to know that their child is okay. And so when she learns about Yaska and Naomi, she is like, well, Naomi went with him because she was in love with him. And at some point during his revenge plan, he must have shifted and fallen in love with her as well. I don't really know if that's the case because we never really get any answers about that, but let's go with it, okay? Yes, Naomi and Yaska have fallen in love. Also, part of the reason these gypsies are so angry with Ted is that they hold family in such high regard. And so Naomi is thinking, I'm 15, and if I am part of this gypsy family, they will accept me and my baby despite my age. They're not going to have all these high expectations from me and all this pressure that my family puts on me, which I'll get to that later. That's kind of her possible rationale. We never actually get to know Naomi. These are all Jenny's assumptions. And Naomi had chosen to go off with Yaska. It takes a really long time to get to this point because we have an inkling, like Michael is finding little things about another man, but there's really nothing to go off of until we finally look into any enemies that the parents may have had. And then all the little things start falling into place. It's at the end of the novel where he is like, all right, we've got him, we know who it is. He's like, just don't go after them yet. Obviously, Jenny wants to go get her kid. But then he automatically comes back and he's like, I'm sorry, both she and the baby are dead. And this devastates Naomi. Not Naomi. I can't get their names right. This devastates Jenny. But then she just starts thinking, as I said, she likes to romanticize. She just starts thinking all these stories that the people are telling as an explanation for how Naomi and the baby died. Are they really true? Or are they just protecting their own? Because if you know anything about gypsies, they are their own subculture, which I don't know much about them, but we'll talk about that later too. Yes, they are their own subculture. They don't really trust outsiders. So Jenny goes in search of his gypsy camp, and in the very end, she does see Naomi. Yaska has been killed by the police because when the police came to talk to the people, he came out guns blazing and then died in the gunfight. So Yaska has died, but Jenny is alive. She sees her mother, but she still chooses to go with the gypsies. I don't quite know why, because maybe her home life really was that bad, but I cannot imagine not missing my parents that much. I could see myself being so angry or so fed up at a certain point that I would leave, but then I would miss my family so much that if I saw my mother, I'd at least want to talk to her, and she really doesn't. She gets in a car with the baby and they leave, and Jenny's okay with it because the new name that she heard the family or the gypsies had given Naomi meant love, so she's like, well, they love my daughter, so I guess we're all right. But I forgot where I was. That's the end of it. Jenny has learned the truth, and there's nothing she can or will do about it. It's kind of up to Naomi now. Is she going to want to live the rest of her life as a gypsy, or is she gonna at some point say, I want to go back to my family? We'll never know. Let's talk about the gypsies. This is, for me, the most intriguing part of the novel because the only exposure I have to gypsies are my Big Fat Gypsy Wedding. I don't know if you've ever seen it. I think it was a TLC show. And so in it, that show was about gypsy girls getting married and just kind of the ostentatiousness of their celebrations. In every episode, they would talk about discrimination against them. And so you do have this sense that gypsies are looked down upon by, I don't know, British English culture. In the show, you don't really, I don't know, it's been such a long time since I've seen the show, but I never really got the sense that they were bad people, that they did bad things. I just got the sense that they were discriminated against because of their past, of their reputation. But in this book, Michael, who Jenny does end up, I guess, is having an affair the right word if you're split with your husband. She gets into some sort of relationship with. That's another bag of worms that I may or may not get into. But he telling Jenny, he's like, you don't understand the way that these people live. They don't live like us. They don't own anything. They steal everything they have. They squat on land. They're all about family, but they just have a different code for living. For me, I just was so intrigued by these are the people that Naomi decided to leave her old life for. I wish that we'd gotten more about the gypsies, about what, because as I'd said, Yaska was kind of their leader, but he wasn't the oldest. So what was it about him that in their culture made him leadership material? Weren't there older men than him? I don't know. It was a subculture, kind of like a subplot that didn't get explored as much as I would have liked, but that's probably because I'm an American and I don't understand things that the native readership does understand about that culture. It doesn't really take away from the novel. It's just, for me, my brain caught on to something that felt like it was unfulfilled. So let's talk about Jenny for a minute. I felt like she wasn't given enough credit. Maybe it's because I come from a family with two working parents, but I was like, what has she done wrong? And she's the narrator. And so even it's kind of from her perspective that she's at fault for everything. So why is her husband blaming her for his affair? Why does Ed blame her for his drug use? Why does Naomi blame her for all of the rules that are imposed upon her that make her feel like if she doesn't succeed, she's a failure? Or if she's not perfect, she's a failure. I'm like, Jenny is a human being. Jenny has a job. I get it. When you're a parent, you do need to make that decision. Or when you're considering parenthood, you do need to make a decision. Job or parenting. So sure, maybe she worked too much, but it wasn't that she didn't care about her family. But then, Ed is also like, you never cooked us good meals. Well, you know what, son? Don't you have hands? Can't you cook a meal? Your mom's working. Can't you come home and defrost the chicken or something? Everybody relied on Jenny to do everything, and then they complained because she never had time. I just had a really big issue on how all the blame went on Jenny. And even in the present, it's kind of like, oh, well, you can't get over Naomi's loss. And then even herself, she's like, I can't have anything to do with other people. I need to be by myself. I don't want to form relationships. Holy cow, Jenny. I mean, give yourself a break. So yes, I kind of took issue with how everything was her fault. Because as I said, she's human. She's gonna make mistakes. She's gonna miss things. If her children decide to stop talking to her, is that really her fault? Or is that their decision? Like their decision to hold a grudge? If her husband is dissatisfied that they don't have time for sex, well, maybe he needs to be home more often too. They're both tired, So why is it her fault that she comes home, cooks dinner, cleans up, does whatever she needs to do, and then falls asleep? He's the one who has late surgeries that take till 10 or 11 at night. How is he not at fault too? Why is she the reason that he seeks solace elsewhere? I don't know. There are definitely parts of this novel that they just got me so angry. But maybe that's what Shemilt wanted. She wants to get emotion from you, and she did it. Okay? Check it out. Let me know what you think. If you, as always, if you agree, if you disagree, what you saw, things that maybe I forgot to mention, because this is just one of those books that has a lot of detail. There is just so much that I couldn't go over because we would be here forever. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this review, and I'll see you later. Bye!